Imagine a weapon that defied the laws of physics and turned naval battles into a bloodbath on dry land. A weapon that offered the greatest hope, but then exacted a terrible, unthinkable price. Today we dive into the history of the First Punic War, a conflict where common sense died first. You will learn how a nation that was terrified of water and had no navy challenged the masters of the sea. We will tell you about a battle whose scale eclipses the engagements of the 20th century. 300,000 men in a single spot on the ocean, ready to kill each other. But the most shocking part lies ahead. Why did a genius invention that saved Rome eventually cause the death of 100,000 people in a single night? Why was a Roman consul subjected to torture that makes the blood run cold? A barrel of nails and severed eyelids under the scorching sun. And how did this chain of monstrous mistakes and fanatical stubbornness give birth to the most terrifying enemy in Roman history, whose oath of vengeance would change the world forever? Watch until the end. The climax of this drama is worth it. Taste it on your lips. It is not just salt. It is the taste of bile, fear, and total helplessness. You are a Roman legionary, the finest killing machine antiquity has ever produced. On solid ground, you are a god. Your dense wall of shields is indestructible. Your short gladius sword opens enemies like a butcher opens carcasses. But right now, there is no ground beneath your feet. There is only the slippery, dancing deck of an alien element. The world is tilting. Your stomach is rising to your throat. And on the horizon, blocking out the sun with its sails, comes death. It comes fast, silent, and professional. It is Carthage. And right now, you realize that your iron discipline counts for absolutely nothing here. Welcome to the First Punic War, the place where common sense died first. To understand the scale of the catastrophe, we need to rewind time. The middle of the 3rd century before Christ. Picture a map of the Mediterranean. This is not just geography, it is a cage with two predators. In the north is Rome, a young, aggressive wolf, stupid in its stubbornness. It has crushed Italy beneath it, breaking the backs of the Samnites and the Greeks. The Romans are geniuses of the land. They know how to build roads, camps, and walls. They march, they dig. They know that if an enemy is standing on the ground, he is a corpse. Opposite them, across a narrow strait, lies Carthage. This is the Shark, an ancient, wealthy, cynical trading empire. While the Romans were kneading mud with their sandals, the Carthaginians were charting the stars and the currents. Their fleet is the absolute hegemon. Their ships, quinqueremes with 5 banks of oars, are the Formula One cars of the ancient world. Fast, maneuverable, deadly. Their crews are hereditary sailors who feel the wind with their skin. For Carthage, the sea is home, a highway, and a treasury. For Rome, the sea is a wet grave where monsters live. And then these two elements collide in Sicily. The beginning of the conflict looks like a bad historical joke. The year 264 before Christ. Roman legions crossed to the island on rafts and borrowed boats because Rome has no fleet. None at all. Not a single warship. Imagine a modern army trying to land at Normandy on air mattresses. Funny? The Carthaginian admirals thought it was funny too. The first years of the war turn into a bloody and senseless farce. The Romans, finding themselves on Sicily, do what they do best. They start capturing cities. Agrigentum falls. The legions march from victory to victory. They smash the mercenary armies of Carthage in the field. But what is the point? You capture a city, slaughter the garrison, hang your standards on the walls. And then you look into the harbor, and there are the Carthaginian ships. They bring food, reinforcements, weapons. They block your supplies. They laugh at you. The situation reaches a strategic dead end that reeks of hopelessness. The wolf stands on the shore and growls at the shark swimming 100 yards away. He can chew the coastal sand all he wants, but he cannot reach the enemy. The Romans control the interior of Sicily, but the coast remains with Carthage. Carthaginian squadrons raid the Italian coasts, burn villas, take slaves, and the Roman Senate can only grind its teeth. It was a war of attrition, where one side had endless money and freedom of maneuver, and the other had only rage and hungry infantry. Listen to what they are saying in the camp outside Syracuse. There is filth, lice, and dysentery. The soldiers ask their commanders, "How much longer are we going to rot here?
We slaughtered everyone who came out against us on the battlefield.
Why aren't we winning?" And the commanders have no answer, because they know the truth. You cannot defeat a maritime empire while sitting in a trench. It is physically impossible. The Carthaginians use hit-and-run tactics. They appear out of the fog, strike, and dissolve into the blue. They are ghosts. And the Roman legion is a clumsy bear trying to swat a mosquito with a sledgehammer. By the year 261 before Christ, a realization begins to ripen in Rome, terrible in its obviousness. The realization does not come all at once. It seeps in like water into a punctured hull. Old senators, used to thinking in terms of foot marches, clutch their heads. To win, Rome needs to stop being Rome. They need to do something that contradicts their very nature. They need to go into the water. They need a fleet. But it is easy to say, we need a fleet. You cannot simply order a tree to become a ship. Rome has no engineers, no blueprints, no captains, no rowers. A Roman citizen despises the oar. Rowing is the lot of slaves and freedmen. The sea for a Roman is chaos, a territory unbound by law and order. A Roman loves the straight lines of roads and the square corners of camps. The sea is crooked, shifting, and treacherous. To go into the sea means to go against the will of the gods. But this is exactly where the trait that will make Rome great and terrible reveals itself. A total psychopathic inability to admit defeat. If nature is against us, we will change nature. If we do not know how to swim, we will drain the sea. If we do not have ships, we will copy them. Legend has it that a storm washed a Carthaginian quinquereme onto the shores of Italy. A smashed, half-rotten carcass of a warship. For any other people, it would have been just a pile of firewood. For the Romans, it was a gift of fate, the blueprints of the Death Star falling into their hands.
Carpenters took it apart plank by plank.
They studied every tenon, every joint, every curve of the keel. And the work began to boil. Hellish work that made the forests of Italy groan. While axes chopped down centuries-old oaks, future rowers were learning to row. On land. Yes, you heard that right. They built wooden benches on the sand, sat thousands of people there, and forced them to wave oars in the air, mimicking the rhythm of battle. 1, 2, 1, 2! Dust rising in columns, sweat pouring in streams, officers with sticks beating those who lost the beat. Does it look comical? Perhaps. Carthaginian spies, reporting this to Carthage, must have been rolling on the floor laughing. These idiots are learning to swim on grass. They think the sea is just a big puddle. But that laughter was premature. Carthage failed to account for one thing. The Romans did not intend to play by the rules. They did not intend to become better sailors. They were preparing something else. Something that would turn elegant ship fencing into a dirty back-alley knife fight. Rome understood. If they went out to sea and tried to outmaneuver the Carthaginians, they would simply be drowned like kittens. Roman ships, built from raw green wood, were heavy and clumsy. They rotted as they sailed. The crews were inexperienced land rats who got sick at the mere thought of rolling waves. Chances in a fair fight, 0. Absolute 0. And then some unknown genius, whose name history has barely preserved, proposed an idea. Insane. Suicidal. Brilliant. If we cannot catch them, we must grab them. If we do not know how to fight on water, we must bring the land with us on board. On the bows of the clumsy Roman galleys, they began to erect strange, massive structures resembling siege towers. They stuck up into the air, disrupting the center of gravity, threatening to capsize the ship with any side wave. It was an engineering monstrosity. It was a challenge to common sense. Soldiers looked at these towers with horror and hope. Sailors spat. But the order was given. The fleet prepared to launch. New planks, still smelling of pitch, creaked, and on the bow of every ship, like the beak of a bird of prey, a sinister silhouette rose into the sky. The Romans called it the Corvus, the raven. And this raven had already spread its wings, preparing to turn the Mediterranean Sea into a slaughterhouse. The landing was approaching, and no one, not even the Romans themselves, knew that their new weapon would be a curse that would bring them victory, but take a terrible price for it. Ahead was not just a battle. Ahead was a meeting with the abyss. Do you hear that sound? It is not the sound of the surf. It is the sound of axes. Thousands of axes biting into the living flesh of Italian forests. To understand the madness of what happened next, you need to imagine the tempo of this race. Rome is not just building a fleet. It is building it from scratch, in a state of panic-fueled adrenaline frenzy. 60 days. Think about it. 60 days from the moment the tree was still rustling with leaves in the forest to the moment it touched the water as a warship. This is not shipbuilding. This is industrial hysteria. Roman engineers look at the trophy Carthaginian quinquereme washed ashore like savages looking at a smartphone. They see a complex system of ribs, a cunningly curved keel, perfect hydrodynamics, and they start to copy. Blindly, literally, part by part. Every plank is numbered. Assembly halls work around the clock by torchlight. Pitch boils, men drop from exhaustion, but the conveyor belt does not stop. But there is one problem that enthusiasm cannot solve: wood. Ship timber must dry for years, releasing moisture, becoming resonant and strong as bone. Rome does not have years. They have only now. They build from raw green wood. The planks are heavy, saturated with sap. When these ships are launched, they will begin to warp, creak, and leak like sieves. But that is half the trouble. The main thing is the weight. The Roman copies turn out to be heavy, clumsy monstrosities. It is as if you tried to build a race car from blueprints, but used cast iron instead of carbon fiber. A Carthaginian quinquereme is a dancer. It flies over the waves, obeying the slightest movement of the steering oar. The Roman copy is a drunk loader stumbling on flat ground. Roman admirals understand. If they go out in these tubs against the elite of the Carthaginian fleet in a fair maneuvering battle, they will all be drowned in an hour. The Carthaginians will just come alongside, strike with the ram, and sail away, watching the Romans blow bubbles. It will not be a battle. It will be a massacre of infants. And right here, in an atmosphere of total hopelessness, the raven is born. The Corvus. Forget everything you knew about naval elegance. The Corvus is a spit in the face of naval science. Imagine a massive wooden bridge, 11 meters long and a little over a meter wide. It is mounted on the bow of the ship, on a special pivoting hinge. It is raised up using a system of pulleys and ropes attached to the mast. This thing sticks up into the sky like a giant pointing finger. But the most terrifying part is at the end of this bridge. A huge iron spike, curved like a beak, pointing down. Hundreds of pounds of sharpened metal. The operating principle is terrifyingly primitive. When an enemy ship is nearby, you simply cut the rope. The bridge falls under its own weight. The iron beak punches through the enemy deck with monstrous force and gets stuck there tight. That is it. No one is sailing anywhere anymore. This invention changes the very physics of war. It cancels the need to be a good sailor. You do not need to catch the wind. You do not need to know the currents.
You just need to get close enough to drop this cursed plank on the enemy's head.
As soon as the spike drives into the wood, the two ships turn into a single platform. And across this bridge, roaring with rage, bursts the thing they fear most in the world. Roman heavy infantry. Legionaries in full armor, with shields and short swords. For them, this bridge is the road home. The road to a solid surface where they know how to kill better than anyone in the world. A naval battle instantly turns into a land brawl, where the helmsman's skill no longer matters. The only thing that matters is how fast you can work a sword in tight quarters. Old captains looked at these structures with horror. "Are you out of your minds?" they shouted at the engineers. "This thing weighs a ton. It stands on the very bow. The center of gravity is shifted. The slightest side storm, one bad wave, and the ship will capsize itself without any enemy." And they were right. Absolutely right. The Raven made the already bad Roman ships catastrophically unstable. Any storm threatened them with destruction. But the Senate did not care about safety. They needed victory, at any cost, even if the price was the risk of drowning on the way to the battlefield. It was an all-in bet. Rome decided it was better to risk capsizing than to let Carthage dictate terms. Look at these ships standing on the slipways before launch. They look menacing and ridiculous at the same time. New, clumsy, smelling of raw wood and pitch. On every bow, tied to the mast, hangs this monstrous bridge. It creaks in the wind. Soldiers, looking at it, smile predatory smiles. They call it their salvation. Sailors cross themselves and pray to Neptune for calm seas. No one in the world had ever seen anything like it. This is an asymmetric response in its purest form. The Carthaginians had spent years honing the art of the ramming strike, the dike-plus maneuver, breaking the line. They were preparing for a chess match on water. And the Romans intended to come to this match with a baseball bat. The fleet is ready. Hundreds of galleys, heavy as fate itself, push off from the docks of Ostia and Messina. The water churns under thousands of oars rowing out of sync. Commanders scream, trying to straighten the line. The ships yaw, dip their noses, burying themselves in the waves under the weight of the ravens. This is the strangest, ugliest, and most dangerous armada the Mediterranean Sea has ever seen. They go south, to where the fast, predatory Carthaginian squadrons are waiting for them. The admirals of Carthage, receiving reports of the Romans' approach, were surely rubbing their hands. They anticipated an easy hunt. They thought the Romans had simply copied their ships, but done it poorly. They did not know that on every Roman bow, death was lurking, ready to fall from the sky and turn an elegant naval battle into a bloody meat grinder. The sea was calm, but the air trembled with tension. For the first time in history, a land power did not just go out to sea, but brought its laws into the realm of the waves. The Romans were not coming to swim, they were coming to trample. And that heavy, rhythmic creak of the rigging sounded like the ticking of a time bomb placed under the foundation of the ancient world. Ahead, beyond the horizon, clouds were already gathering, and the year 256 was getting ready to become the year the sea would turn red with blood. Course set for Cape Ecnomus, the southern coast of Sicily, summer of the year 256 before Christ. The heat is such that the air over the water shimmers, turning the horizon into a blurry haze. But if you look at the sea near Cape Ecnomus, you will not see water. You will see a forest. An endless, frightening forest of masts, stretching from edge to edge of the visible world.
Here, in one point of space and time, gathered the greatest concentration of naval power in human history. Forget the Battle of Jutland. Forget Midway. In terms of the number of human souls thrown onto the scales of fate in a single day, the Battle of Ecnomus leaves them far behind. 700 ships, 300,000 men. 300,000. Imagine if the entire population of a medium-sized modern city were suddenly put on wooden shells, given weapons, and sent to kill each other in the middle of the open sea. This is not a battle. This is a demographic disaster waiting for a spark. The Romans put to sea 330 ships. The Carthaginians, 350. These were not just fleets. They were floating city-states. The Roman plan was simple and brutal, like a punch with brass knuckles. Break through the barrier, land in Africa, and burn Carthage to the ground. The Carthaginian plan was a surgeon's plan.
Cut off, surround, and drown this insane horde before it reached their home shore. Look at the Roman formation. They did not line up in a line, as all normal admirals of that time did. No, they formed a wedge. 3 squadrons formed a giant triangle, the point aimed at the enemy. At the head were the 2 consular hexaremes, the largest ships of the fleet. Behind them, in echelon, came 2 lines of warships. At the base of the triangle was the 3rd squadron, towing transport ships with horses and provisions. And bringing up the rear was the 4th line, the reserve. It looked like the tip of a spear or the head of an enraged boar. This formation said only one thing: we are coming straight through. The Romans knew their ships were slower. They knew their crews were worse. So they clenched into a fist, bristled with ravens, and prepared to break down walls. The density of the formation was such that it seemed one could run from ship to ship without getting one's feet wet. And opposite them, spanning the horizon, stretched the thin, long line of the Carthaginian fleet. The admirals of Carthage, Hamilcar and Hanno, looked at the Roman wedge and saw not a threat, but an opportunity. They understood. This Roman boar is terrifying in a head-on collision, but it is clumsy, and if you make it run, it will get winded. The silence before the battle is scarier than the battle itself. You can only hear the creak of oarlocks and the heavy breathing of thousands of men. In the holds of the Roman ships sit the rowers, 300 men per vessel. They do not see the sea. They see only the sweaty back of the comrade in front and hear the rhythmic strike of the Calusta's hammer setting the pace. For them, this day is darkness, stuffiness, and the expectation of death that will come with the water punching through the hull. And then, the signal. Trumpets roar, tearing the hot air. The Roman wedge, picking up speed, rushes into the center of the Carthaginian line. The water boils under thousands of oars. The Roman consuls, Regulus and Vulso, standing on the prows of the lead ships, see the enemy center begin to buckle. The Carthaginian ships turn around and retreat. To a Roman legionary, accustomed to the enemy fleeing from his rage, this looks like victory. "They're scared! They're running!" floats over the waves. Adrenaline hits the head. The consuls give the order, "Pursue!" The wedge accelerates. The Romans lean on the oars, trying to catch the fleeing Punics to drive their ravens into their sterns. But it was not panic. It was a classic, cold, cynical trap. Hamilcar, commanding the Carthaginian center, was putting on a show. He was drawing the Roman vanguard away, forcing it to separate from the main forces. The Roman wedge stretched out, broke formation. The first two squadrons sped forward, leaving behind the clumsy trucks and the rear reserve. The single organism of the Roman fleet was dismembered, and at the moment when the gap became critical, the trap snapped shut. A signal from the Carthage flagship and the fleeing ships of the center suddenly make a sharp turn. Hundreds of quinquiremes simultaneously turned their bows toward their pursuers. It was a maneuver of such synchronization that the Romans could not even dream of. And at this time, the wings of the Carthaginian fleet, commanded by Hanno, began to close in. The left flank struck the Roman transports. The right went into the rear of the reserve. The sea instantly turned into chaos. A single battle broke into three huge, independent engagements. It was hell smeared over the surface of the water for miles. In the center, where the advanced Roman squadrons collided with Hamilcar's main forces, something unimaginable was happening. Carthaginian ships, fast and light, circled around the heavy Roman galleys like a pack of piranhas around wounded hippos. They tried to ram, break oars, hit the vulnerable sides. They relied on speed and skill. But the Romans brought ravens with them, and every time a Carthaginian quinquireme got too close for a ramming strike, death fell from above with a crash. Iron beaks punched through decks, locking the ships together tightly. The elegant naval battle Hamilcar had counted on broke against crude Roman engineering. Meanwhile, a tragedy was unfolding in the rear. Roman transports, abandoned by the vanguard, cut the tow ropes in panic. Laden with provisions and horses, the ships drifted helplessly while fast Carthaginian raiders swooped down on them. Disaster seemed inevitable. The Carthaginian plan worked perfectly. The Romans were divided, surrounded, and attacked from different sides. Any military textbook will tell you that in such a situation, an army is doomed. But textbooks are written for people who know when to give up. The Romans did not know this. They were trapped on their ships. Many did not know how to swim, and they had only one choice: kill the enemy or die themselves. Fear grew into berserker rage. The water around Ecnomus began to change color. First, it became murky with debris, splinters, and floating trash. And then it started to turn pink. Imagine that sound. It is not just screams, it is a symphony of destruction. The crack of breaking oars, sounding like the snapping of giant bones. The dull thuds of bronze rams against wood. The screech of saws as ships rub sides. And over all this, the endless, bestial roar of thousands of throats trying to outshout fear. Roman ships, locked with enemies, turned into floating forts. Legionaries jumped over the rails, slipping on blood, and hacked into the ranks of lightly armed Carthaginian sailors. It was a slaughter in a phone booth. The Carthaginians were sailors. They were used to space and wind. The Romans brought with them the cramp and suffocation of an infantry brawl. But the outcome of the battle still hung by a thread. The Roman center held, but the flanks were dying. Transports were pinned to the shore. The reserve fought desperately against superior forces. The Carthaginian admirals saw that victory was close. They just needed to press a little harder, strike the final blow. They did not know that at this very moment, amidst the smoke and chaos, the very factor they could not calculate would kick in. The factor of brute force multiplied by luck. The ravens kept falling, and every fallen bridge became a tombstone for Carthaginian hope. And the sun of the year 256 continued to beat down indifferently from above, illuminating the scene of the greatest naval murder of all time. Imagine the face of a Carthaginian captain at that moment. He is a professional, a veteran of dozens of campaigns. He sees before him a clumsy Roman vessel listing to the side when turning. He sees an exposed flank. It is a perfect target. A practice target. He shouts to the helmsman, "Full speed ahead! Ram!" The rowers lean on the oars. The quinquereme accelerates, cutting the waves like a knife through butter. The Carthaginian already hears in his head the sound of cracking Roman ribs and breaking planks. Victory is a matter of mathematics and speed. He has calculated everything. But he did not calculate one thing: the shadow. A second before impact, the Romans do something no one expects. They do not try to dodge. They do not maneuver. They simply cut the rope. A massive 11-meter bridge hanging from the mast falls down with a terrible whistle. Gravity does its job. The iron spike at the end of the Raven, weighing hundreds of pounds, punches through the deck of the Carthaginian quinquereme like a needle pierces papyrus. The crash of the impact drowns out all sounds of battle. The ships shudder as if they had hit a reef. The Carthaginians fall off their feet from inertia, and in that same second, the most terrible thing happens. The ships are locked. Deadlocked. The Carthaginian captain realizes he can no longer maneuver. His fast, light ship has turned into an anchor. He tries to reverse, but the iron holds fast. And while he looks in horror at this cursed bridge, men are already running across it. Not sailors, not seamen. These are killers, clad in bronze and iron. Roman legionaries. They run across the bridge, shield to shield, their sandals thundering on the planks like hail on a roof. For the Carthaginian crew, this is a shock that paralyzes the will. They are armed with light javelins, knives, maybe short swords. They wear no armor so as not to drown if they fall into the water, and against them is heavy infantry, the best in the world, which has just gotten solid footing beneath its feet. The battle turns into a massacre. The elegant naval engagement is over. A street fight in a dark alley has begun, where one has a pocket knife and the other has a chainsaw. The Romans burst onto the deck and do what years of drill have taught them. Stab, slash, step forward. The Carthaginians try to resist, but what can a sailor do against a wall of shields? They are pushed to the stern. They are thrown overboard. The water boils with falling bodies. Those who did not manage to jump die where they stood. The scene repeats dozens, hundreds of times along the entire front. Bridges fall with a crash, announcing the sentence of the old school of naval warfare. The Romans break the very concept of combat. They refuse to play by rules where the winner is the one who swims faster. They say, "No, we won't swim. We will stand and kill." The sea ceased to be water. The Romans turned it into land, paving the space between ships with wooden gangways and the corpses of enemies. In the center of the battle, a turning point occurs. Two Roman consuls, Marcus Atilius Regulus and Lucius Manlius Vulso, break through Hamilcar's formation. The Carthaginian center, the pride of the fleet, is smashed and fleeing. The ravens have done their job, but the battle is not over. Remember, the Roman fleet was torn apart. While the consuls are crushing the center, a catastrophe is happening in the rear. The Carthaginian left flank has pinned the Roman transports to the shore, and the right flank has surrounded the reserve. And here, Roman discipline reveals itself. Any other fleet, seeing a fleeing enemy, would have rushed in pursuit of prey. Greed and excitement usually defeat tactics, but not with the Romans. The consuls stop the pursuit. They turn their ships around. They see smoke and chaos in their rear and go to the rescue. It was the moment of truth. The Roman squadron, having just one in the center, returns at full speed. They crash down on the Carthaginians, who already thought they had defeated the Roman reserve. The Punics find themselves between the hammer and the anvil. Those who, a minute ago, were driving the Romans into a trap find themselves surrounded. And again, the ravens fall. Again, the grinding of iron. Again, heavy infantry on the decks. Carthaginian admirals watch this from the shore or from distant ships and do not believe their eyes. Their brilliant plan, their magnificent maneuvers, their knowledge of the sea, all of it shattered against crude, primitive force. It was a clash of two worlds, the world of art and the world of the hammer. And the hammer won. It smashed art into splinters. By evening, the sea at Cape Ecnomus calms down, but its appearance could drive one mad. Dozens of ships are burning, casting gloomy reflections on the darkening water. The surface of the sea is covered with debris, oars, planks, barrels, and bodies. Thousands of bodies. Carthage lost more than 30 ships sunk and, most humiliatingly, 64 ships captured. 64 of the best ships in the world now belonged to Rome, along with their crews. The Romans lost 24 vessels. The score on the board was a rout. The victors, half dead from exhaustion, washed the blood and salt off themselves. They looked south, to where Africa lay hidden beyond the horizon. Before the Battle of Ecnomus, it was an unreachable dream, a mirage. Now it was reality. The greatest fleet standing in their way was not just beaten, it was humiliated and demoralized. Carthage was no longer the master of the sea. The Raven, that ugly child of engineering desperation, opened the gates to the heart of the enemy empire. Soldiers bandaged wounds and sharpened swords. They understood. The worst was behind them. They had defeated the elements. They had defeated the best fleet in the world. What could stop them now? The adrenaline of victory is a terrible drug. It makes you forget caution. It whispers to you that you are chosen, that the gods are on your side. The Roman fleet, having regrouped, raised its sails. Course for the African coast. The sea, reddened with Carthaginian blood, seemed to part, inviting the predator to enter the victim's house. The Romans were not just going to fight, they were going to punish. And none of them, looking at the approaching coast of Africa, guessed that this open door led not to triumph, but straight into a new, even more sophisticated trap. Africa. Even the smell here is different. Sweet, spicy, stifling. It is the smell not of war, but of luxury. When Roman legionaries jump from the ships onto the shore at Clupea, they expect to see a line of enemies, but they see paradise. The Carthaginian countryside is not the rugged hills of Italy. These are endless gardens, vineyards, villas drowning in greenery, and fields that seem capable of feeding half the world. And into this paradise bursts a beast that hasn't eaten in a week. The Roman army doesn't just land. It spreads through this garden like a plague. Imagine a barbarian who has eaten spelt porridge all his life, suddenly finding himself at a feast of the gods. Legionaries loot with frenzy people who cannot believe their eyes. They burst into the estates of Carthaginian nobility, smash exquisite statues just to see what's inside, tear down tapestries worth more than their entire village, and slaughter livestock right in marble courtyards. Smoke from burning villas rises to the sky in black columns, blocking out the African sun. This is a signal for Carthage. War has come to your home. You thought the sea would protect you. The sea betrayed you. Now we are here, and we are not going to leave. And right here, in the middle of this bloody carnival, An event occurs that historians will call the peak of Roman stupidity. The Senate, sitting in distant Italy, decides that the war is practically won. They send an order: leave only part of the troops in Africa. The rest return with the fleet. It sounds like madness, but in Rome's logic, it is economy. Why feed a huge army if the enemy is already trembling? One consul, Lucius Manlius Vulso, takes the fleet, the booty, and the prisoners and sails away. Staying on the shore is Marcus Atilius Regulus. With him, 15,000 infantry and 500 horsemen. 15,000 men against a huge empire on its own territory. Any other commander would have panicked, but Regulus is pleased. He is happy. Why? Because now the glory of victory will belong to him alone. He won't have to share the triumph. Look at him. He sits in his tent, surrounded by looted gold, and writes a letter to the Senate. There is no fear in it, only impatience. He complains that the workers have run away from his farm in Italy and asks the state to look after his land while he finishes business with Carthage. For him, the destruction of the world's greatest trading power is just an administrative task distracting him from agriculture. This is not confidence. This is pride. The Greeks called it hubris, arrogance that is inevitably punished by the gods. Carthage is in panic. Their army is beaten in skirmishes, their lands ravaged. Refugees flood the city, hunger and hysteria are on the streets. The Council of Elders decides, we need to negotiate. They are ready to pay. They are ready to give up Sicily. They are ready for humiliation, just to save the city. Ambassadors are sent to Regulus. These are the best men of Carthage, aristocrats in purple togas, diplomats used to deciding the fates of the world over a cup of wine. The meeting takes place in the Roman camp. Imagine the contrast. On one side, refined, frightened, but dignified Carthaginians. On the other, Regulus. He doesn't even stand to meet them. He sits, unwashed, in dusty armor, and looks at them like dirt under his fingernails. He does not negotiate. He dictates a sentence. The conditions he puts forward make the ambassadors turn pale. You will give up Sicily and Sardinia. You will disband your fleet. You will pay us an annual tribute. You will reimburse our war expenses. And finally, the most terrible thing. You have no right to declare war or make peace without Rome's permission. This is not a peace treaty. This is a slave collar. Regulus demands Carthage stop being a state. He demands a great empire become an obedient dog at Rome's feet. The ambassadors try to object. They speak of honor, of the impossibility of fulfilling such conditions. Regulus only sneers. His phrase will go down in history. One must know how to either conquer or submit. There is not a drop of doubt in his voice. He is sure he has cornered the rat, and the rat will now sign the paper. But Regulus makes the classic mistake of a tyrant. He forgets that if you drive a rat into a corner and leave it no exit, it won't sign the paper. It will jump at your throat. The ambassadors return to Carthage. They enter the council and read out the Roman conditions. Silence hangs in the hall. Dead, heavy silence. People understand. There is no hope. Rome does not want peace. Rome wants their destruction. And in this silence, a chemical reaction occurs. Fear evaporates. In its place comes cold, furious determination. If the choice is between slavery and death, Carthage chooses battle. Better to die with a sword in hand than live as slaves, say the elders. The city that just yesterday was ready to surrender turns into a united military camp.
Women cut their hair to weave ropes for catapults. Golden statues of gods are melted down into coins for mercenaries. Every man capable of holding a spear joins the ranks. Regulus wanted to break their will, but instead he welded them into a monolith. And the Roman consul sleeps peacefully in his tent. He is sure he has won. He already sees himself in a chariot, riding through Rome to the shouts of the crowd. He does not know that with his arrogance, he has just signed a death sentence for himself and thousands of his soldiers. He does not know that at this very moment, an inconspicuous ship is entering the port of Carthage. There is no gold on board, no food. There is only one man. His name is Xanthippus. He is a Spartan, and he brings with him the thing Carthage lacks so much, and Regulus has in excess, but with a minus sign: professionalism. History froze on the threshold of catastrophe. The Roman eagle, drunk on easy blood, sits on top of a cliff cleaning its feathers, not noticing that below, in the shadow of the fortress walls, a hunter is already drawing his bowstring. The air smells of a storm, and this smell overpowers even the smoke of burning villas. Africa is preparing to teach Rome a lesson it will never forget. A lesson about what happens when you start considering yourself equal to the gods. In the port of Carthage, chaos reigns. Imagine a city that has already said goodbye to life. People are hiding valuables, praying to strange gods, packing bags. But amidst this bedlam, a man walks down the gangway of another ship arriving from Greece who looks like he mistook a funeral for a parade. He carries no bales of gold. He is not a refugee. He wears a simple, life-beaten tunic, and in his eyes is the icy calm of a surgeon who has come to the morgue to say, "The patient is still alive. Give me a scalpel." His name is Xanthippus. He is a Spartan, and that changes everything. In the ancient world, the word Spartan meant the same thing as special forces operative today, multiplied by a fanatic. This is a man for whom war is not politics, not an adventure, and not a way to get rich. It is a craft. The only craft he has mastered to perfection. The Carthaginian council hires him as just another mercenary commander, but Xanthippus does not behave like a mercenary. He behaves like an auditor. He spends a few days not drinking, but observing. He watches how Carthaginian generals deploy troops. He looks at the terrain. He looks at the elephants stomping in pens. And finally, he utters a phrase that should have cost him his head, but instead saved an empire. He comes out to the Council of Elders and says right into their frightened, sweaty faces, "The Romans are not defeating you. You are defeating yourselves. Your army is a lion led by donkeys." This is a shock. The silence in the hall is such that you can hear a fly hitting the ceiling. But Xanthippus continues. He explains to them an elementary truth, simple as a club strike. Carthage has the advantage in cavalry and elephants. A huge advantage. 4,000 horsemen, 100 war elephants. But where do Carthaginian generals fight? On hills, on broken terrain, where cavalry stumbles and elephants are useless, where Roman infantry feels right at home. "You are afraid of the plain," says Xanthippus. "You think on the plain the Romans will surround you. But on the plain, your elephants will trample them, and your cavalry will shut the trap. Give me the army, bring it out onto the flat, and I will show you how legions die." Desperation is the best motivator. Proud Carthaginian aristocrats, who in peacetime wouldn't have even looked in the direction of this tramp,
give him supreme command. And the transformation begins. Xanthippus turns Carthage into Sparta. Forget about democracy and debates. Dictatorship reigns on the training field. From morning till night, soldiers march under the scorching sun. 1, 2, hold the line, shields higher! Xanthippus teaches them not just to fight, he teaches them the geometry of death. He builds a phalanx, a dense forest of spears where every soldier protects his neighbor. He drills the elephants, forcing them to act not as a herd, but as a tank battalion. He drives the Numidian cavalry until foam covers the horses' flanks, practicing synchronized strikes from the flanks. Mercenaries, citizens, militia, they all go through the meat grinder of Spartan training. Xanthippus breaks their ego to assemble a mechanism out of them. Soldiers begin to understand, this Greek has a plan. For the first time in months, not fear, but a mean, cold glint appears in their eyes. They are no longer victims. They are tools. And what is Regulus doing at this time? Our Roman consul is still sitting in his camp near Tunis, enjoying the role of victor. When scouts report to him that the Carthaginian army has left the city and is moving to meet them, he laughs. When they tell him the Punics have come down from the hills and are forming up on a wide, flat plain in the valley of the Bagradas River, he roars with laughter. These idiots want to fight a Roman legion in an open field, he surely thought. Are they seeking death? Well, we will give it to them. Regulus sees the desperation of madness in the enemy's actions. He does not see the cold calculation behind it. He despises Xanthippus the Greekling. What can some Spartan mercenary know about war between great powers? Roman infantry is invincible in a head-on collision. This is an axiom. Regulus is sure that as soon as his legions strike the center, the motley army of Carthage will scatter just as before. The Romans move out to meet them. 15,000 infantry, 500 horsemen. They walk confidently, kicking up dust with their sandals, joking in the ranks. They are used to Carthaginians running at the first onslaught. They do not notice that the enemy has changed. The formation waiting for them ahead does not waver. The spears do not tremble. Elephants stand in a single line in front of the infantry like a living fortress wall, swaying their trunks. Tension hangs in the air, thick as before a thunderstorm. Xanthippus, standing on a hill, watches the Romans approach. He sees their mistake even before the first trumpet signal sounds. Regulus, fearing the elephants, orders the maniples to deepen their formation. He makes his ranks narrower but deeper to better withstand the impact. The Spartan sneers. The Roman is sticking his own head in the noose. By deepening the formation, Regulus voluntarily gave up the width of the front. He made his army a compact target, perfect for flanking. Fool, Xanthippus must have whispered, looking at the Roman standards. You came to play checkers, but we are playing chess, and I have already checkmated you. It was a classic conflict of two mentalities. Roman arrogance, used to breaking walls with its forehead, against Greek intellect, which looks for a lever to overturn the world. Regulus was an excellent soldier, but a bad general. He did not understand that he was no longer fighting a trading republic. He was fighting military science, honed by centuries of Spartan history. The sun rises higher, illuminating the Bagradas Valley. Dust raised by thousands of feet hangs in the air like a golden fog. The Romans get closer. The ground begins to tremble, barely noticeably. This is not an earthquake. 100 war elephants are taking the first step toward destiny. Xanthippus raises his hand. Lecture time is over. The exam has begun. and there will be no retakes. On this day, in the valley of the Bagradus River, Roman pride was to meet something harder than Carthaginian gold. Tusks, hooves, and Spartan steel. The lesson was beginning. Feel that vibration. It starts not in your ears, but in the soles of your sandals. Small stones on the ground begin to jump as if alive. It is a rhythm impossible to confuse with anything else. First a hum, low and guttural, like the grumbling of the earth itself. And then, out of the cloud of dust raised by the hot wind, a gray wall appears. This is not a metaphor. It is 100 war elephants. 100 living siege towers, each weighing several tons, accelerated to the speed of a galloping horse. Xanthippus didn't play long preludes. He just pulled the trigger. Imagine yourself in the front row of a Roman maniple. You have a scutum, a large wooden shield covered in leather with a metal rim. It stops sword and spear strikes perfectly. But when 4 tons of rage, crowned with meter-long tusks, fly at you, your shield turns into cardboard, your armor into foil, your discipline into dust. The impact of elephants on the Roman formation in the Bagradus Valley is the physics of catastrophe. It is a collision of a biological train with pedestrians. The Roman formation didn't just bend, it burst with a terrifying crunch. Elephants crashed into dense rows of infantry, scattering legionaries like bowling pins. They trampled, crushed, pierced with tusks and grabbed with trunks. Those who stood in the front rows ceased to exist in a split second. They turned into red mud mixed with sand. But the worst part was not in the first second. The worst part started later. The elephants, having broken through the first line, continued to rampage inside the formation. Roman tactics, based on tight interaction and the elbow of a comrade, turned against them. In the crush, there is nowhere to run. Legionaries, trying to dodge the monsters, crushed each other. The formation turned into a panicked mob, gripped by animal terror. The commands of centurions drowned in the trumpet roar of beasts and the screams of the dying. However, Romans are Romans. Even in this hell, they tried to fight. Veterans who survived the first impact slipped between the giants' legs. They stabbed them in their soft bellies, hamstrung them. Wounded elephants went berserk, trampling both their own and strangers, but the momentum of the attack began to run out. It seemed there was a chance. It seemed if they killed these monsters, they could survive. And that's when the second part of Xanthippus' trap snapped shut. Those legionaries who miraculously survived under the elephant's feet broke through the gray wall and, choking on dust and blood, came out into the open space. They thought the worst was behind them, but in front of them, fresh, calm, and implacable, stood the Carthaginian phalanx. The Spartan kept his mercenaries in reserve, while the elephants did the dirty work. Now, when the Romans were exhausted, shell-shocked, and disorganized, a forest of spears came down on them. It was a slaughter. A Roman with a short sword must get close to strike. A phalangite with a long spear kills him at a distance. Exhausted legionaries ran into the wall of shields, unable to break it, and died by the dozens. And what was happening on the flanks? Remember those pitiful 500 Roman horsemen? 4,000 Carthaginian and Numidian cavalrymen swept them from the battlefield in a few minutes, not even noticing the resistance. The Roman cavalry simply evaporated. And now this avalanche of riders, making a wide arc, was returning. They struck from the rear and flanks. The ring closed. For 15,000 men, the Bagradus Valley became a giant mass grave. The dust was so thick, the sun dimmed. In this dusty sack, men killed each other almost by touch. The Roman army, the pride of the Republic, ceased to be an army. It became meat. There were no more maniples, no cohorts. There was only screaming, bloody chaos, methodically compressed from all sides. Xanthippus watched this from the hill with the cold satisfaction of a mathematician whose equation balanced out. He felt no hatred. He was just doing his job. He proved that order beats class and intelligence beats pride. And where is our hero? Where is Marcus Atilius Regulus, who just this morning was planning his triumph? He was there, in the center of the meat grinder. He saw his elite soldiers, conquerors of cities, lying in the dust with shattered skulls. He saw his standards falling into the mud. His arrogance was knocked out of him along with his breath. When Numidian horsemen surrounded the remnants of his squad, he did not throw himself on his sword as a hero of old legends should. He surrendered.
A consul of Rome, representative of the highest power, a man who spoke to kings like slaves, now stood on his knees in the dust, while a mercenary tied his hands behind his back. It was a scene of absolute humiliation. Regulus, who demanded total capitulation from Carthage, now became a trophy himself, a living souvenir. The numbers of this massacre are horrifying even millennia later. Of 15,000 Romans, 13,000 remained lying on the battlefield. 13,000 young, strong men were destroyed in a few hours. Only 2,000 men, the left flank that managed to break through and escape at the start of the battle, reached Clupea. The rest either died under the feet of elephants and horse hooves, or, like Regulus, were taken prisoner to become toys for a vengeful mob. When the dust finally settled, the Bagradas Valley presented a landscape from a nightmare. The earth was soaked with blood so much that it turned into a crimson swamp. The screams of the wounded were replaced by moans, and then silence, broken only by the cawing of crows. Carthage rejoiced. The city standing on the brink of destruction was saved by a single battle. The people hailed Xanthippus as a demigod, but the Spartan was too smart to stay. He knew the gratitude of kings and crowds is short-lived, and the envy of local generals is deadly. Having received his gold, he boarded a ship and vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving the Punics to celebrate a victory they did not earn, but bought. And in Rome, they did not yet know about the catastrophe. The Senate waited for news of the fall of Carthage. They waited for gold and slaves. Instead, news crawled toward them that would make the eternal city shudder. The war, which seemed won, suddenly turned into collapse. But Rome is a beast that pain only makes meaner. Upon learning of Regulus's fate and the destruction of the army, the Republic did not ask for peace. It went into a frenzy. The Senate makes a decision dictated not by logic, but by pure rage. We will not leave them there. We will get our own back. Rome prepares a rescue expedition. Not just a couple of ships. They send their entire fleet. 350 warships go to the shores of Africa to pick up the pitiful remnants of survivors. They do not yet know that man can kill thousands, but nature is capable of killing hundreds of thousands. And the most terrible tragedy of this war is still ahead, lurking in the dark waters off the coast of Sicily. Rome doesn't know how to cry. Rome only knows how to avenge. The news of the catastrophe in the Bagradas Valley and the capture of Regulus reached the Senate, but instead of mourning, it caused an explosion of fury. You thought they would ask for peace? Like hell. They decide to double the stakes. If Africa devoured our army, we will send a fleet of such strength there that the sea itself will overflow its banks. Summer of the year 255. Rome launches an armada, 350 warships,
This is not just a rescue operation, it is a punitive expedition. They go to the shores of Africa, sweeping away everything in their path. At Cape Hermaeum, they meet the Carthaginian fleet and simply smear it. 114 enemy ships captured. The path to Clupea, where the pitiful 2,000 surviving legionaries are holed up, is open. The Romans pick up their own, exhausted, starving soldiers who survived the hell of elephants and the Spartan phalanx climb onto the decks, kissing the planks. They think they are saved. They think the worst is behind them. Consuls Servius Fulvius and Marcus Aemilius celebrate triumph. They did the impossible, invaded enemy waters, defeated the enemy, and saved citizens. Now home. And this is where the drama begins, compared to which the Battle of Ecnomus is child's play with boats. Captains and pilots, experienced Greeks and Sicilians hired by Rome, beg the consuls, "Do not go along the southern coast of Sicily. It is the windy season. The stars are bad. Go north. It is safe there." But Roman consuls are not sailors. They are politicians in armor. They are drunk on success. They just defeated Carthage. What is some wind to them? They want to pass along the southern coast to demonstrate strength to coastal cities, to intimidate wavering allies. "We are Rome. We dictate terms, not the weather," reads in their order. The fleet turns south. It was a decision that killed more people than all of Hannibal's armies put together. Off the coast of Camarina, the sky suddenly changes color. It becomes not gray, but purple-black, the color of a deep bruise. The wind dies down for a second to take a breath, and then strikes with the force of a blacksmith's hammer. A storm begins of such ferocity that even seasoned sailors fall to their knees. And then the main hero and main villain of this story steps onto the stage. The Raven. That same boarding bridge that gave Rome victory at Mylae and Ecnomus. A ton of oak and iron sticking out on the bow of every ship. Remember what the engineers said? This disrupts stability. In battle, on calm water, it was tolerable. But in a storm, when waves 3 stories high hit the side, the Raven becomes a death sentence. Imagine the physics of this nightmare. The ship flies up onto the crest of a wave. The nose shoots up. The heavy bridge on the mast works like a pendulum. It swings. The center of gravity is catastrophically high. As soon as the vessel starts to list, this pendulum pulls it down into the abyss. The ship cannot straighten up. It simply flips keel up. This is not a maritime disaster. This is genocide arranged by nature. In one night, the pride of Rome turns into splinters. Hundreds of ships flip simultaneously. Imagine that sound. It is not the heroic clang of swords. It is the crack of breaking hulls, the scream of tearing rigging, and the cries of 100,000 people being covered by black water. 100,000. Think about that number. It is the population of a major ancient metropolis, and they all die within a few hours. The legionaries have no chance. They wear heavy armor, chainmail, greaves. In the water, these are anchors. They go to the bottom instantly, not even having time to gasp for air. Rowers, many of whom are chained to benches or simply locked in holds, drown in darkness as water fills the overturned hulls. It is death in a tin can. Those washed overboard try to cling to debris, but the sea at Camarina is a meat grinder. Sharp rocks of the shore against which waves smash people like dolls. No heroism, no last words. Only cold, salt, darkness, and endless horror. In the morning, the storm subsides, and the picture that opens to the survivors on the shore makes the toughest veterans turn gray. Polybius writes that the entire coast of Sicily, for many miles,
was strewn with corpses and wreckage. The sea spat out what it could not digest, mountains of bodies. Roman aristocrats mixed with slaves, legionaries embracing fragments of the very ravens that killed them. Wooden bridges that brought Rome glory now lay on the sand like broken toys, having taken their terrible toll. Out of 364 ships, 80 survived. 284 warships destroyed. Gone to the bottom with them were the treasury, loot from Africa, and the hope for a quick end to the war. It was the largest naval catastrophe in human history by number of victims. Even tsunamis and typhoons of the modern era rarely took so many lives in a single night. In Rome, shock is replaced by numbness. Every family lost someone. Fathers, sons, brothers. The Senate sits in deathly silence.
They defeated the Carthaginian fleet, they defeated the Carthaginian army, but they lost the war against physics. The god Neptune, whom they tried to humiliate by shackling the sea in fetters of bridges and roads, presented the bill. And this bill turned out to be unbearable. The raven was a brilliant invention, but it was a one-time ticket. It allowed land rats to win battles, but it did not make them sailors. The sea does not forgive amateurs. The sea does not forgive pride. The Romans decided they could ignore the laws of nature, and nature reminded them who the real master is here. The Carthaginians, learning of the disaster, could not believe their luck. The gods, it seemed, had switched to their side. The Roman fleet destroyed without a single shot fired. Sicily is open again. The war that was supposed to end in Rome's triumph reset to zero. Everything must start from the beginning. Build again, recruit men again, teach them to row again. But in this mountain of corpses on the shore of Camarina, there was one nuance Carthage missed again. Any other nation, after such a blow, would have signed a capitulation. Any normal ruler would have said, "Enough, the gods are against us." But Rome is not a normal state. It is a machine running on stubbornness. Instead of crying, Rome clenches its teeth until they crack. The Senate announces a new draft. Taxes skyrocket. The forests of Italy groan under axes again. "We will build a new fleet," they say, "and another one, and another, until we run out of wood or people." This is no longer strategy. This is fanaticism. Rome decides to drown Carthage in its own blood, if necessary. The disaster at Camarina put an end to the use of ravens. Admirals learned the lesson. The price for stability in battle is death in a storm. New ships will be built without these monstrous bridges. The Romans will have to learn to fight for real, learn sail, oar, and maneuver. The era of cheating is over. The era of professionalism, paid for with 100,000 lives, has begun. The war enters its darkest, most grueling phase, where the winner will not be the one who hits harder, but the one who refuses to die. Silence. After the roar of the storm, after the screams of the drowning, after the thunder of battles, silence comes. It presses on the ears harder than noise. It is the silence of exhaustion. By the year 250 before Christ, both superpowers resemble two boxers in the 12th round. Faces turned into bloody pulp, arms hanging like whips, legs failing. Rome lost its fleet. Carthage lost its army. The treasury is empty for both. People are tired of death notices. In this dead point, Carthage decides to make a knight's move. They don't want to fight anymore. They want a respite. They need to return their captured soldiers, the ones the Romans seized in previous battles. Carthage has a trump card, living, though thoroughly battered. For 5 years, Marcus Atilius Regulus has been sitting in their dungeon. The very consul who promised to grind them into dust and then lay at the feet of the Spartan Xanthippus. The Carthaginians think logically. They are merchants. For them, everything in the world has a price. They look at Regulus and see not an enemy, but an asset. This man wants to live, they think. He is a Roman aristocrat. He has a wife, children, vineyards at home. He will do anything to get out of this hole. The plan is simple. Send Regulus to Rome as an ambassador. Let him convince the Senate to make peace, or at least exchange prisoners. They extract a word from him, a single word of honor. If you do not succeed, you will return to Carthage and die. Regulus nods. For the Carthaginians, this is just insurance. They are sure he will crawl before the senators on his knees, begging for peace, just to avoid returning to the cell. They do not understand one thing. In 5 years in darkness, sorting through memories of his shame, Regulus has changed. That arrogant fool who landed in Africa is gone. Only a lump of cold, crystal-clear hatred for himself remains. And for the enemy. The ship with Regulus arrives in Rome. Imagine this scene. The whole city pours onto the streets. People are crying. For them, this is a miracle. The return of a hero risen from the dead. His wife runs to meet him. Children reach out their hands. Senators prepare solemn speeches. But Regulus does not step ashore as a victor. He stops at the city limits. "I am no longer a citizen," he says in a hollow voice, unused to speech. "I am a slave of Carthage. Slaves have no right to enter the city of the free." He refuses to embrace his wife. He doesn't even look at his children. He stands, eyes cast down to the ground, like a criminal. This is the first shock. The Romans freeze. They expected tears of joy, but got an icy shower. The Senate gathers outside the city walls to hear him. Carthaginian ambassadors stand nearby, smirking smugly. They expect Regulus to start his song about peace now, about how hard it is in captivity, about needing to pity the Roman prisoners in Africa. And Regulus begins to speak. But what he says makes the Carthaginians turn pale and the senators open their mouths. "Do not make peace," he says. His voice is hard as steel. "Carthage is broken. I saw them from the inside. They have no money, their mercenaries are rebelling, their ships are rotting. One good strike, and they will collapse. Do not give them a respite. Do not exchange prisoners. Those who surrendered to the enemy are already dead to Rome. They are cowards. Let them rot in Africa." Then he speaks about himself. And this is the most terrible part. "Do not exchange me. I am an old man. I am broken. My life is worth nothing. But in exchange, you will give them young, healthy Carthaginian commanders who will return and kill your children. It is a bad deal. I am spent material. Leave me." Think about this moment. A man signs his own death warrant in front of the entire nation. The senators are horrified. They shout, "No! We won't let you go! Stay! The Pope will absolve your oath!" Friends grab his toga. His wife sobs, begging him to stay. He is offered life. He is offered forgiveness. He is offered peace. What would you have done? Honestly, you would have stayed. Any normal person would have stayed. To hell with an oath given to an enemy. To hell with politics. You only have one life. But Regulus does what turns him from an unlucky general into an icon of Roman fanaticism. He pushes friends away. He turns his back on his sobbing family and silently walks to the Carthaginian ship. He knows what awaits him. He knows the Carthaginians heard his speech.
he knows they are furious.
He goes to torture voluntarily. This is not just honor. This is some transcendent form of pride or redemption. He decides his death will bring Rome more benefit than his life. He turns his body into a weapon of propaganda. Carthage welcomes him not as an ambassador, but as a traitor. Punic rage knows no bounds. They counted on a deal, but got a public slap in the face. Legends about Regulus's death differ in details, but agree on one thing. It was hell. History has preserved a grim image. A barrel, an ordinary wooden barrel, studded with sharp nails from the inside. Regulus is placed inside. He cannot lean, cannot relax, cannot sleep. Any movement is pain. Nails do not kill immediately. They just deny rest. But that is not enough for the Carthaginians. They want to take from him the light he loved so much. They slice off his eyelids and put the barrel in the blazing sun. Imagine the African sun, white, incinerating, merciless. Eyes deprived of protection cannot close. They dry out, burn, melt. It is torture by light. Regulus dies slowly. From pain, from insomnia, from dehydration, from madness. Every hour in that box is an eternity. He pays the full price for his arrogance at the beginning of the war, and for his stubbornness at the end. Was it worth it? From a humanist point of view, it is the raving of a madman. From a historical point of view, it was a brilliant move. News of Regulus's martyr death reaches Rome, and produces the effect of an exploding bomb. If anyone in the Senate had thought of peace before, now those thoughts vanished. Pity vanished. Only the thirst for revenge remained. With his death, Regulus did what he could not do with his life. He united Rome. He gave them a martyr. Now the war with Carthage ceased to be a political conflict over territories. It became a holy war. For Regulus! This cry will now sound on the decks of new ships. Roman matrons, learning of the consul's death, look at the captive Carthaginian generals kept in Rome in relative comfort. History says Regulus's widow and children were given the right to take revenge. They starved the noble prisoners to death and tortured them in the basement of their house until magistrates intervened, horrified by the cruelty. Atrocity breeds atrocity. The cycle of violence closed, but the war is still not won. Emotions are fuel, but you cannot steer a ship with them. Rome still has no fleet. The treasury is so empty the state is bankrupt. The Senate throws up its hands. There is no money. It would seem this is the end. Carthage can celebrate victory by attrition. But they forgot who they are dealing with. When the state runs out of money, the Romans still have citizens. Enter the oligarchs, private individuals, the rich who could have sat in their villas and waited for the war to end. They do something that does not fit in a normal person's head. They start building a battle fleet with their own money. Not taxes, not loans, donations. We will chip in and build an armada, they say. It was the last desperate push, an all-in bet by an entire nation. Axes are knocking in the ports again. But this time, engineers do not put heavy ravens on the bows of ships. The Romans learned the lesson. The new fleet will be light. It will be fast. It will be a copy of the best Carthaginian models captured in battles. The Romans finally stopped trying to turn the sea into land. They decided to become the sea. Year 242 before Christ. 200 new, graceful quinqueremes, built with the money of private patriots, glide over the waves. On their decks, there are no cumbersome death machines. Standing there are men ready to win with skill, not mass. This is the last card in the deck. If this fleet dies, Rome falls. They go to the Aegates Islands to put a period in this 23-year meat grinder.
The finale is close, and it will be fast, like a dagger strike.
March 10th, 241 before Christ. Remember this date. This is the day the world turned upside down. At the Aegates Islands, off the western tip of Sicily, the sea is restless. The wind tears the crests of waves, throwing salty spray into the faces of men who came here to die. But this time, something has changed. Look at the Roman ships. You do not see ugly towers on them, no more ravens, those crutches for invalids with which the Romans tried to compensate for their naval incompetence. The decks are clean. The hulls, built with the private money of Roman oligarchs, are predatory and smooth. These are copies of the best raiders of Hannibal the Rhodian. The Romans did what seemed impossible. They evolved. Having spent 23 years, lost 700 ships and 200,000 men, drowned the treasury and a generation of men, the land rats finally grew gills.
Opposite them comes the Carthaginian fleet, under the command of Hanno.
And this is a cruel irony of fate. Roles have switched. Carthaginian ships are heavy, clumsy, their waterlines deep underwater. Why? Because they are not ready for battle. Their holds are stuffed with grain, supplies, and money for Hamilcar Barca's army, which is still holding on in Sicily. The Carthaginians thought they would slip through. They thought the Roman fleet did not exist. They counted on unloading quickly, taking Hamilcar's soldiers on board, and only then giving battle. But Gaius Lutatius Catulus, the Roman consul, does not intend to wait. He sees the enemy. He sees the wind blowing in his face, hindering movement. An old Roman admiral would have ordered to wait, or gone straight ahead and drowned. But Catulus is an admiral of the new school. He knows. His crews trained all winter. They ate and slept with oars in their hands. Their muscles remember the rhythm of the storm,
And he gives an order that contradicts the textbooks.
"Drop the masts, drop the sails, to battle!" The Roman fleet goes against the elements. Rowers work like a single piston. Ships cut into the waves, but do not bury their noses, because there is no cursed raven on the bow. They are light. They are maneuverable. They fly. For the Carthaginians, this is a shock. They see the Romans forming a perfect front line. The Punics panic, trying to drop sails, turn their overloaded barges around. But inertia is a merciless thing. Ships loaded with grain react to the rudder with the grace of a drunk elephant. They cannot gain speed for a ramming strike. They are targets. The beating begins. But this time it is not a dirty infantry pileup on decks. This is surgery. Roman quinquiremes come in from the sides. Bronze rams rip open the hulls of Carthaginian vessels with a crunch. Strike, reverse, strike. Water rushes into the holds, mixing with golden wheat.
The sea becomes like a thick porridge of debris, flour, and blood.
Carthaginian sailors, hastily recruited, untrained, scurry about the decks. They cannot board the Romans, they are too fast. They cannot ram, they are too nimble. The greatest sailors of antiquity suddenly find themselves in the role of clumsy novices. The Romans circle around them like a school of sharks around whales, tearing out chunks of flesh. 50 Carthaginian ships go to the bottom in the first hours. 70 are captured, along with crews. The rest, catching a tailwind, flee in horror back to Africa. This is not just a defeat. This is the collapse of the entire logistics of the war. Hamilcar Barca, the genius of guerrilla warfare, the invincible lion of Sicily, remains on the island cut off from the world. No food, No money, no hope. Rome won. Not with a raven, not with luck, not with numbers. It won with skill. When news of the Battle of the Agates Islands reaches Carthage, they do not scream for revenge there. The silence of a bankrupt falls there. The treasury is empty. Mercenaries demand payment. No fleet, no men. The proud trading empire, mistress of the seas, is forced to admit dumb, stubborn, destitute Rome has broken its spine. Carthage sends messengers to Hamilcar. Make peace on any terms, we can't go on. And Hamilcar, grinding his teeth, comes down from the mountains. He is not defeated in battle, but the sea betrayed him. The treaty the parties sign is humiliating. Carthage leaves Sicily. Carthage returns all prisoners for free. Yes, and for that same Regulus they didn't get a dime, only his corpse. Carthage pays a monstrous indemnity, 3,200 talents of silver over 10 years. Rome rejoices, but this jubilation tastes like ash. 23 years of war, hundreds of thousands dead, a generation mowed down to the root, Italy ruined. But they did it. They turned the impossible into the inevitable. Look at the map before the war. The Mediterranean Sea is a Carthaginian lake. Look after, it is Mare Nostrum, our sea. The First Punic War is a story about how will defeats matter. The Romans violated all laws of war, physics, and economics. They built fleets when there was no money. They went to sea when they didn't know how to swim. They sacrificed consuls, armies, and common sense. It was pure, distilled madness. But it was exactly this madness that made Rome a superpower. They understood the main truth of empire. To own the world, you must be ready to burn it, and then build anew on the ashes. They started the war as provincial farmers afraid of water. They ended it as masters of the ocean, before whom the horizon trembles. But this victory has a dark side. In the eyes of the defeated Hamilcar Barca, when he signed the peace treaty, there was no humility. A cold fire burned in them, which 20 years later would set the world on fire again. He would return to Carthage, take his 9-year-old son, bring his hand to the sacrificial fire, and force him to swear eternal hatred for Rome. The boy's name was Hannibal. But that is a completely different story. For now, look at the sea near the Agates Islands. The waves washed away the blood. The wood rotted. Bronze rams lie on the bottom, covered in silt, like monuments to human stubbornness. Here, in this blue abyss, Rome killed its innocents and gave birth to its empire. It proved that if you cannot outplay the enemy, you must outlast him. You must get up one more time than you fall, even if for this you have to pave the sea floor with your dead. And now, looking at this story across millennia, answer one question for yourself. Only honestly. Imagine scales. On one side, the greatness of Rome, roads, law, civilization as we know it. On the other, a barrel with nails in which Regulus dies, the screams of 100,000 drowning in a storm, and a sea turned red with blood. Was the empire worth such a price? Or perhaps true madness is not the raven and not the elephants, but the very belief that greatness justifies any sacrifice? What would you choose? To remain an honest farmer in quiet Italy, or become the master of the world, standing knee-deep in blood? Write in the comments. History will judge.